Jesus Christ, the central figure of Christianity, is renowned for his teachings and parables that offer profound insights into the human condition and the nature of the divine. Among his many teachings, there are 4 parables that specifically address the topic of money and its role in our lives. These parables provide invaluable lessons on the spiritual and moral implications of how we approach, use, and view wealth. Through an analysis of the parable of the rich fool, the parable of the unjust steward, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and the parable of the widow's mite, we will gain a deeper understanding of Jesus' perspective on the spiritual pitfalls and responsibilities associated with material wealth. The first parable we will examine is the parable of the rich fool, found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 16 to 21. In this parable, Jesus tells the story of a wealthy man who experiences a bountiful harvest, leading him to make plans to expand his storage facilities and hoard his wealth. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, "I will do this, I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" In this parable, the rich man's focus is solely on the accumulation and preservation of his material wealth, completely neglecting his spiritual well-being and his responsibility to use his resources for the greater good. His self-centered approach to wealth ultimately leads to his downfall, as God declares him a fool and requires his soul on the very night he had planned to indulge in his riches. The key lesson of this parable is that true wealth and security are not found in the abundance of one's possessions, but in one's relationship with God and the wise stewardship of the resources entrusted to us. It challenges us to consider the fleeting nature of earthly wealth and the importance of being rich toward God, using our resources to further the kingdom of God and care for those in need. The second parable we will examine is the parable of the unjust steward, found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. In this parable, Jesus tells the story of a steward who is caught mismanaging his master's affairs and is about to be fired. In a surprising turn of events, the steward takes drastic action to secure his future. There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, "What is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager." And the manager said to himself, "What shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses." So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" He said, 100 measures of oil." He said to him, "Take your bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. Then he said to another, "And how much do you owe?" He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, "Take your bill, and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. In this parable, the steward, faced with the loss of his position, takes decisive action to secure his future by reducing the debts owed to his master, thereby endearing himself to the debtors and ensuring they will welcome him into their homes after his dismissal. The key lesson of this parable is not that Jesus condones dishonesty, but rather that he commends the steward's resourcefulness and foresight in using his remaining time and resources to secure his future. The parable challenges us to be equally diligent and strategic in our use of the resources entrusted to us, not for selfish gain, but for the purpose of building relationships and securing our eternal future. The parable also serves as a warning against the tendency of the sons of this world, those who are focused on earthly matters, to be more shrewd and proactive in their dealings than the sons of light, those who profess to follow God's ways. It encourages us to be as wise and strategic in our use of money and resources as the unjust steward, but to do so in a manner that aligns with the values of the kingdom of God. The third parable we will explore is the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verses 19 to 31. In this parable, Jesus contrasts the lives of a wealthy man and a poor beggar named Lazarus, and their respective fates in the afterlife. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things, but now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish." In this parable, the rich man lives a life of luxury and indulgence, while the poor Lazarus suffers in destitution at his gate. However, in the afterlife, their fortunes are reversed, with Lazarus being comforted in Abraham's bosom, while the rich man finds himself in torment. The key lesson of this parable is the stark contrast between the temporal nature of earthly wealth and the eternal consequences of how we use it. The rich man's failure to recognize his responsibility to care for the less fortunate Lazarus, despite his abundant resources, ultimately leads to his own spiritual downfall and eternal separation from God. This parable serves as a powerful reminder that our treatment of the poor and our use of wealth are not merely matters of social or economic concern, but have profound spiritual implications. It challenges us to cultivate a heart of compassion and to use our resources to serve and uplift those in need, rather than hoarding them for our own comfort and indulgence. The fourth and final parable we will examine is the parable of the widow's mite, found in the Gospels of Mark and Luke. In this parable, Jesus observes a poor widow making a small monetary offering at the temple, and contrasts her gift with the large donations of the wealthy. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly, I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." In this parable, Jesus commends the widow's small offering, recognizing that her gift, though seemingly insignificant, represents a much greater sacrifice and devotion than the large sums contributed by the wealthy. The widow's willingness to give everything she had, despite her own dire circumstances, serves as a powerful example of true generosity and trust in God. The key lesson of this parable is that the value of our financial contributions is not measured by their absolute size, but by the spirit and sacrifice with which they are given. It challenges us to examine our own giving patterns and motivations, encouraging us to prioritize the quality of our financial stewardship over the quantity of our donations. This parable also reminds us that God sees the heart and values the sincere, sacrificial gifts of the poor over the ostentatious donations of the wealthy. It calls us to cultivate a spirit of generosity and trust in God, regardless of our financial circumstances, and to use our resources in a way that honors Him and blesses others. In conclusion, these 4 parables of Jesus on the topic of money provide invaluable insights into the spiritual and moral dimensions of wealth and its management. From the parable of the rich fool, we learn the importance of being rich toward God and not letting our material possessions become our primary source of security and fulfillment. The parable of the unjust steward challenges us to be equally strategic and resourceful in our use of money and resources, but to do so in a way that aligns with the values of the kingdom of God. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus reminds us of the eternal consequences of our treatment of the poor and our use of wealth, while the parable of the widow's mite encourages us to prioritize the quality of our financial stewardship over the quantity of our donations. These parables invite us to examine our own relationship with money and possessions, and to align our priorities and actions with the teachings of Jesus. They call us to cultivate a spirit of generosity, compassion, and trust in God, recognizing that true wealth is found not in the abundance of our material possessions, but in the depth of our relationship with the divine. As we reflect on these timeless parables, may they inspire us to use our resources in a way that honors God, blesses others, and secures our eternal future. By heeding the wisdom of Jesus' teachings on money, we can find the freedom and fulfillment that comes from being rich in the things that matter most.